Welcome everyone to tonight's work session on Mechanic Street Pump Station Replacement Project for Monday, June 22nd, this year, 2026. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to pass it over to Karen, but it's nice to have Eric Meserve from AECOM here. And did I get that?
Yep.
McCachran, Meserve's a tough one. Terry Damaris, welcome back to City Hall Chambers. Eric Fiedler, still with the city and working on it. But Suzanne and Peter, I'm looking forward to this discussion. I know there's a lot of folks that have been asking about this, and glad we're able to schedule the work session to go through the project to date and what we can expect. So I'll pass it over to City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and you stole all my work,
Oh,
except
sorry.
I would also mention that landscape architect Terrence Parker is here as well to answer questions as we move through the presentation. So I will share, and I will start it off with Mr. Fiedler.
Thank you. Evening, Mayor, councilors. Thanks for taking the time to discuss the Mechanic Street Pump Station project with us tonight. Again, I'm Eric Fiedler, city engineer, and I don't want to make sure we mention Tyler Reese. He's also helping out as project management on the project management side of the project for the city. So he's sitting out back. He didn't get the big table, but he's doing a lot of work to help us make this project run smoothly.
Can we speak into the microphone, I guess?
Sorry about that. All right, before we jump into the presentation, I wanted to give a brief overview of kind of the goals and the structure of the work session tonight. I'll basically tee up the kind of the background, a brief summary and the needs of the project, as well as I'm going to try to tee up like a proposed concept right at the beginning so we can kind of get a visual of where the presentation is going. I think when we started putting the presentation together, kind of the feedback we got was we're very linear engineers and we're going through this thing, but trying to get a kind of a visual of where we're heading would be helpful, and then we can kind of go through some of the details of how we got there, type thing. Hopefully, it doesn't ruin the punchline, but the proposed concept that we're going to talk about will include some site plans, prepared renderings. We thought the renderings would be helpful to kind of help visualize the site and help all of you kind of see or talk from a consistent basis, and it'll help us engage with probably some more discussions. I want to emphasize, though, that any of the figures in the renderings, again, these are help facilitate discussions. Nothing is set in stone at this point, but we thought it was important to have those just to kind of talk from a similar basis. I think the goal for this is to try to spend maybe 30 minutes on just kind of presenting kind of the project and where we're at so far. So we have plenty of time for discussion and sort of make sure we understand sort of the needs or any of the feedback that we can gather tonight. That being said, any questions before we kick it off? All right. Let's jump in. So background, Mechanic Street Pump Station. I know most of you have seen it or have been around it or aware of kind of the issues that we're having. It's our largest wastewater pump station. It can push about 22 MGD, and it's the primary pump station to the wastewater plant in Pierce Island.
Eric, what's MGD?
Million gallons per day. So it's a very large facility. So the pumps themselves are taller than me. They're like 12 feet tall. It's located right, I think most of you know where it is, right near the bridge, kind of going over to Pierce Island. 113 Mechanic Street. It was constructed in '63, but it was started originally as a 10 MGD plant, and they kept on adding and adding and adding. So now it's a shoehorn of a really big station, big capacity, and a small footprint. And I think a lot of you have been aware of kind of the recent failures that we've had at the site and issues that we've had in terms of reliability and maintenance. Some of these pictures are actually pretty illustrative of the issues that we're having. You can kind of see some of the flooding from a couple years ago. But the goals of the project are, we need to improve the reliability of the facility. We need to meet current design standards and operational recommendations. We want to integrate the site a little bit better into the surroundings, into the neighborhood and into the Prescott Park area. And also we need to make this facility resilient for flooding protection, any sort of sea level rise, and we need to be planning for the long term. That's the 50 to 100 year lifespan. So again, that'll go into how we're looking at siting and where these things should be located, because right now it's in a king tide, and some of those storm surges they're up the door, and that's very problematic, especially if we have infrastructure that's constructed for the long lifespan. So just for instance, you can go back, there's also other degradation stuff which makes it very challenging kind of at the site itself. So that's just an example. That's the motor in the volute, and or the motor and the impeller. So the pump is even larger than that. So that is very, very large. So we'll go to the next slide, please. All right, I'll hand it over to Terry to kind of start going through some of the analysis and kind of the detailed analysis. Oh, wait. Oh, no. Sorry. I'm still on this one. Sorry. So just a quick overview of kind of the site itself. So again, the property that the existing pump station on is in the red box there. You can kind of see the roof of the building, the generators out back and stuff. The green and the red parcels are both city parcels. But another parcel in discussion is a Prescott Park parcel, and that's in the purple bounded area. But this is overlaid with the 100-year flood map. So if you look at sort of the site there, it's very challenging in terms of siting a critical infrastructure, because like we've seen, it's an area that's inundated within the 100-year floodplain. The next slide. So this is just high level. This is just to kick off to see, to kind of show you what the proposed concept that we'll kind of get through as we kind of go through the details later. We had a few goals, is try to connect Prescott Park and the Point of Grace cemeteries with the site. Because right now it's kind of isolated. You have the old La Cava building, you have the pump station. It's a little bit disjointed from the rest of the neighborhood. We have some opportunities to kind of improve the intersection safety. It's one of the consistent feedbacks we get with people trying to cross the road near the bridge there. It's not really a safe intersection. There's a need for a new pump station building specifically. So on the previous picture, you saw some of that concrete degradation. So even just the building itself is starting to degrade, the concrete, some of the other like structural members and parts of that building. But the concept itself, we kind of went through a process of citing things and all that. And we thought that the new modern standards make the footprint of a pump station much larger than historical ones would be. Right now, we have a lot of hydraulic issues. But if we're using modern standards and to ensure reliability and kind of equipment longevity, it's a lot bigger of a footprint. So we started to kind of paper doll things around and how do we actually fit all these things, all the infrastructure that we need on the site. And it turns out that siting an above ground building is gonna be very challenging. So we thought maybe some of the best way of doing it was to have a portion of the building with electrical and generators and stuff be above grade, and a portion where the pumps are and stuff be below grade. So they could be kind of still, the space still usable by the public, while also having kind of all the necessary equipment and infrastructure on site. So just on this picture here, it shows you a little bit of, it looks like a green space, but some of that is underground pump station wet well areas, and some of it is above grade control building and generators. And there's some public green space and amenity opportunities on the site. And we work with Terrence to try to kind of look at some initial concepts of what feasibly could happen. But again, this is for discussion as we move forward. All right, so next one, this is just an elevation. This is kind of looking from the Prescott Park side. You see how the yellow building is the generator and electrical building. Whereas you look down behind the trees there's some green space and some gray, which would be like a paver type thing. That's a below grade wet well for the pumps and things like that. So again, you see the building is pretty close to the bridge, but again, if you kind of remember back to the floodplain thing, really the only high spot that's out of the floodplain is closer to the bridge and further out of the ground. So, but if you think about the level of the building is the level of the building to protect it from the floodplain. So if you moved it further to the center of the site, the building still has to stay at the same height. So just think about that, where it's kind of getting snugged into a slope. If not, it would just be sticking way out of the ground. So we tried to use some like reasonable judgment to kind of manage the visual impacts of a new building. The next one, this is looking from kind of that Mechanic Street, but from that Gate Street side, kind of looking up towards the bridge ramp. So again, we tried to hide things with vegetation and stuff, but again, this is just a different perspective of the site. Off to the right would be the below grade wet well. All right, and now we're over to Terry's side of things, where we're gonna go through kind of like, how did we get to kind of that proposed concept that I first teed up?
Thanks, Eric. So we'll come back and revisit the proposed concept, but early on in the process, we had to identify and eliminate all different alternatives prior to figuring out what that concept looked like. So there's a whole separate process that occurred. First and foremost, we looked at trying to take the existing pump station and moving it towards the downtown. I'll talk through some of the locations that we looked at, but there were several sub-options to that plan. We also looked at relocating the pump station over the river to Pierce Island to try and get it out of that site altogether. And lastly, as we mentioned, there were several different options that we looked at on the existing site, which is very similar to the proposed concept that we presented. But what you see on the right-hand side here is the options considered. We iterated on a lot of different options. We'll run through a few of those just so you're aware. Next slide, please. In regards to locating the pump station downtown, this is really, looking at it, it's the larger pump station. So if you were to move the Mechanic Street pump station to any other location, you still have a lot of local sewers and local infrastructure that needs to remain. So regardless, you're always going to have a pump station there. But in terms of the effort here, we were looking at moving it to any of one of 3 different locations: the Parrot Ave parking lot, adjacent to the Puddle Dock parking lot, and then the Memorial Bridge parking lot by Prescott Park. None of these locations ideal necessarily, but as part of an analysis to look at this, what we learned as we evaluated this further is that regardless of which location you move it to, you end up having to reconstruct all those areas in yellow. The resulting impact may be a lot more than you'd have just replacing it in its existing location. In addition, you're talking about significant additional costs for that. So we didn't recommend that option. Next slide, please. So our next option was to relocate this over to the Pierce Island side on the other side of the channel. We looked at the primary challenge here is to actually convey the wastewater from where it goes now to the pump station underneath the river. So we looked at a couple different technologies to be able to accomplish that. One of those was directional drilling, and that was determined to not be feasible because of all the soil and rock conditions below the surface. So there's some specifics associated with that technique that made that not feasible or not easily feasible. Second was to look at micro tunneling. So this is actually getting down into the bedrock and tunneling a large diameter channel or large diameter pipe from one side of the channel to the other. So that's what's presented here on this drawing. It looks pretty simple, but those are 30-foot diameter shafts that are 80 feet in the ground. So that's how deep you got to go in order to maintain bedrock all the way across. So that also means a lot of additional infrastructure to connect into those shafts, ventilating those shafts, odor control associated with those shafts. And ultimately, we determined this wasn't it was cost prohibitive, and this was on borderline technically infeasible. So this was not recommended. So that left us with evaluating the 7 options that were on the existing site. And just to reiterate some of what Eric mentioned earlier, here on this site we have the 100-year floodplain in blue. And as we were looking at the design standards, Eric mentioned this was a 10 million gallon per day facility in the 1960s when it was built. Now it's pumping over 22 million gallons per day. Current design and technical standards make this a much larger building. So we knew that we were looking at the existing site in red, the adjacent site that the city preemptively purchased in 2014, 95 Mechanic Street, and also the area of the Prescott Park parcel. Primarily, one was for the site constraints, meaning we needed more area. The other was because of the elevation. So you can see that area, that's the only area that exists in those 3 parcels that isn't within the 100-year floodplain that we can protect the building is the Prescott Park parcel. So we were focused on those 3 areas in the evaluation. Next slide, please. So when we were looking at these different alternatives, there was 3 broad categories. The first broad category was to try to reuse some of the existing infrastructure, so the existing Mechanic Street pump station. While it's not ideal for a new full-fledged pump station, we were trying to say, okay, can we use it for part of the facility? Knowing that, as Eric mentioned, the building would have to be significantly higher than it is today. So you can see that configuration shown on the left-hand side. In the center here is the second option, which was to put a building, or a pump station rather, with equipment that could handle flooding. So that's the concept in the middle. The green and red is a at-grade access with a pump station below with equipment that can deal with flooding. And then you can see the buildings associated with supporting that pump station up adjacent to Pierce Island Road. That's all about the elevation of that area and trying to keep them up above that 100-year floodplain. And then the third concept was to consolidate as much of the building, or consolidate the building into one piece. instead of breaking it apart on the site, put it up at the high point, and you can see that on the far right. And you'll see, as we look further on the next slides, we're going to go on to what was the next phase, which was rendering, doing some initial renderings. But before that, just want to note that as we're looking at these different options, we're also considering how they had an impact for the site as a whole, for the neighborhood and the public. Next slide, please. So as we started the initial renderings, this first one here is the idea of trying to reuse some of the existing infrastructure. On the left-hand side is standing at the Prescott Park area looking towards the existing Mechanic Street pump station. And these two buildings, you see the one on the left-hand side is a control building. So this is where you put all the parts and pieces that you need for the station to work, the generator, the controls, all the electrical equipment. And then in the background, you actually see a version of the existing Mechanic Street pump station being reused as a screening facility. So that facility would be higher. You don't see really anything in the middle. The pump station proposed in this particular configuration is at grade, so it's at the ground. You'll see hatches, and if you look at the picture on the right, you can see a bunch of, in the center, a bunch of small rectangles. Those are the locations to access the building. Those will become more apparent in some of the future renderings. Next slide, please. As we look at, this is alternative B. This was the idea of consolidating everything into a single building and keeping it at the high point of the site. The rendered building on the left, I think, tells the story there. It is a very large building that goes from past the bridge abutment all the way to the intersection. Likely wouldn't fit by the time we got done designing it, so this one was challenging in that sense. It's very, very limited space available with the constraints of the site to consolidate all the parts and pieces together in a single structure. Next slide, please. And this here is the third alternative, which is similar to the proposed concept, but essentially this leaves a pump station at grade in the area of 95 Mechanic Street and part of the Prescott Park parcel. So that facility that's all shown white, you'll see in the future that the hatches are at grade, the rest of the building's underground. And then there's a control building shown on the left-hand side, which is in the form of a colonial to match the surrounding area. And that is brought up to the high point of the site. There's a fair amount of infrastructure that supports that, and we'll review that in a future rendering. Next slide, please. So that brings us back to the proposed concept. So that was kind of the process that we went through was a series of different iterations, really. We started off with the boxes, figured out what fit. We had looked at a lot of the information on the existing site, moved to the initial renderings, used those renderings to make some additional decisions, and then we landed on the proposed concept and advanced that a bit more. So we'll go through the different areas here, but generally we made some improvements to the intersection. We provided some landscaping features around the proposed control building. And then there's a green space area surrounding and above the pump station. So next slide, please. And you've previously seen these, they're same renderings as you saw earlier. This is from Prescott Park looking towards Mechanic Street. As I mentioned, you can't see the pump station necessarily. You can see the hatches, control buildings on the left, and then there's a green space in the area of the pump station. Next slide, please. Similar rendering shown previously, which is from Mechanic Street looking towards Pierce Island Road. One thing to note, there's some existing exterior equipment that will be needed to support the functions of the pump station. They include a fuel tank for the generator and also an odor control system. It's hard at this stage to show all those parts and pieces, and obviously we're showing some mature landscaping here. So, that'll be a a big part of our consideration is how to screen that facade for that equipment as we look at this moving forward. Next slide, please. So looking at the conceptual pump station, this is really focused on the two parts. So on the bottom side of this figure on the right, you have a dashed line. That dashed line underneath it is the structure that holds the grinder facility and the pumps. This is what does the work. That equipment is the type that can handle water above in that structure. If it gets water in it, it will be fine. It's not going to get damaged. They're submersible type pumps. They're made for that kind of condition. Leading to and from that building are some red lines. From the bottom up to the dashed line is the gravity sewer, bringing wastewater into the facility. And then you have the dashed lines on the top side, which are the force mains connecting to the existing force mains that bring it to Pierce Island. The control building itself sits up high. So in order to accommodate the site features, we have some retaining walls. There's a terraced retaining wall in there so that site can be supported flat and allow an area for parking and that exterior equipment that I was telling you about, the odor control and the fuel tank. It's also a transformer to the right side of the building. Thank you. Looking at just to the top side of this, we have the intersection, some proposed intersection improvements. So the idea here was to kind of change the geometry a bit of that area. It can be challenging now with folks driving over the bridge, seeing pedestrians crossing. So we've reconfigured this in a way that it helps to tee up the intersection a bit as best possible, modifies the alignment of the sidewalk on the Prescott Park side, and creates a new sidewalk along Point of Graves on Mechanic Street. So this provides a new crosswalk across the street, allows for someone to walk over to Point of Graves entrance or down towards the green space by the pump station.
And it buffers the cemetery wall too, because where you get snow damage and vehicle traffic right adjacent to that, so at least there'll be a buffer away from that. So we've coordinated with the kind of the cemetery group and the folks that are working
Just
on that.
speak into the.
Oh, sorry. We're working with the cemetery folks and the design for that restoration of the Point of Grave Cemetery. So I think they're reasonably well coordinated at this point.
And then above the pump station, this is an area that is something that could be considered over time. Obviously, the pump station itself can be constructed. Those white rectangles that you see on there, the hatches that are required to access down in the pump station. But the area as a whole could provide a place to reconfigure the existing area for some kind of green space with a number of different features. It could be things like seating, walking paths, raised planters, shrubs, some kind of surface features that would be amenable to the community. So I think that's kind of this proposed concept's there. It's something we can talk about, but the intent there is to allow that to be considered over time, separate from the pump station. Overall timeline, we've already completed the feasibility analysis. That's what's led to the information you see here. The fiscal 27 capital improvements plan has been authorized. A pre-application for the costs of final design and construction has been submitted. And following that, there'll be some discussions related to the Prescott Park parcel with the charitable division of the Attorney General's office. In the November timeframe, we're looking to conduct, or this summer and in November, some public outreach. Parallel to some of these efforts, we'll have preliminary design and updated cost opinion for the station. Final design will follow that, and then construction. So it's a long program, but this is a general timeline. With that, I'll pass it back to Eric.
Right. So the thought is that at this meeting, we kind of gather some of your feedback and sort of like, are we missing anything? Is there anything big picture wise that we need to consider as part of these analyses? Try to incorporate it in that. The plan is to have 2 public meetings. The thought is one in the summer and maybe one after people go back to school. The thought was rather than have them both clustered in the summer, maybe there's a benefit from scheduling. So we'll work with the city manager and everyone to kind of do that. Probably one at City Hall, maybe one local to Mechanic Street. We're updating our project portal, but the likely thing we're going to do for this project is on the project website is have an option for kind of electronic feedback and stuff. If people want to put in comments, questions, things like that, we can gather that from our larger public audience. I think the thought is we'd also go in front of the park committee just to kind of see what opportunities are available, kind of present the space, because it's to some extent it's an open palette where there's a lot of opportunities, especially this waterfront, potentially integration with, Prescott Park, and there's potential for other types of amenities on the site. We're engineers, so we have Terrence helping us out, but ultimately there's a lot of opportunities that maybe we haven't even considered, and we'd like to get feedback from the community. And then the thought is after we gather kind of a public feedback, comments, feedback from the council, we kind of package it up, kind of say like, are we kind of in the ballpark? And then we can kind of bring that into the design phase type thing. So the thought was we kind of summarize kind of the feedback we've gotten from the community and from everyone, send it back as like an informational, just to say, hey, this is what we've gotten. We think, are we ready to move forward, or we need further discussion to make sure, or iterate on some of the assumptions that we had baked into the project. So the thought is here, we did a pretty high level, we didn't talk too many details, so just to give us time to kind of talk through it. And I was thinking maybe we can go back to maybe one of the site plans or something, and we can kind of talk over that if there's questions or comments, hopefully.
Councilor Cook?
What do you anticipate for process with New Hampshire DES for permitting?
Right, so we've actually, part of this initial phase of items, we kind of understanding what the elevations and the height and the spatially where things need to be. I think we got a consensus on kind of the minimum height of, electrical equipment, things like that. So they're on board with that. They've been part of some of the review processes, at least initially. But as we get into detailed design, we'd coordinate with them. But it's just going to be an ongoing process. We'd submit and consult with them, because they basically are funding our design phase of this. So we already have SRF funding for this all the way through final design.
And I know the neighborhood is interested in the current house that sits.
The white La Cava?
Yes, there on the La Cava Wharf. Do you know when that would be coming down as part of this plan?
My understanding is that we were going to try to make that concurrent with the project, but
Yeah, I mean, it could come down as really as soon as anybody, if there was a lot of desire to make it happen, we'll look to get it done sooner than later. The intent was to try not to disrupt the neighborhood until we had an idea of where we were going, because we weren't sure if that space was going to be used for structure or something. So we didn't want to create an open space where people really all of a sudden became really attached to the view, and then we had to put something in there. So we wanted to have some idea of what we were going to do before we took it down. But as Eric said, we're looking to try to do it concurrently with the project. However, it's not in great shape. It really is not a reusable building, and it needs to be taken down.
yeah, we do have some communication equipment. We can relocate that out of there. It's just kind of hanging off the side of it.
Yep.
And what we didn't mention too is, with our initial discussions, I think Eversource is interested in kind of rerouting some of their primaries and stuff. So maybe undergrounding some utilities and kind of cleaning up some of the overhead wires in the area too. So there's aspects of that we really didn't talk about, but there's those conversations have been occurring. So
Thank you.
Councilor Moore?
I just have some questions around, because this is being built into a slope, and I see where the parking is sort of next to the building, because the building's the only thing that's above grade, right? So I guess where the fuel tank and the odor, are those things all underground? It's just hard to tell because the car's parked right next to it in the picture.
they have
Yeah.
to be above ground. So we have to keep them above flood levels and stuff like that. So
Okay.
there's and then there's freeboard on top of it. So those were,
So they're above ground, but they're behind the fencing, is that what
yeah,
I'm
they're
getting?
kind of hidden behind some screening stuff and all that. So I think that's
Okay.
something we need more looks at, because again, it never looks as good.
Well, I'm just thinking a fuel tank at an intersection where you could have,
It'll be well protected.
Okay.
And then this will be buffered by that terrace too as well, so trying to get into it. Another thing we didn't talk about too is that bridge there it's kind of in the queue for some type of improvements type thing, and the thought is, I think my understanding is the concept is that it would probably would actually move, so construction-wise, it would move a half a lane to the north. So then the building would be close to the road now, but long-term, it's probably gonna be buffered even further from it as well.
All right, I have another one. The little hatches that get you down into the pump station.
Yeah.
Or actual pump, those are protected in some way so that we couldn't have children wandering into
Yeah,
them,
they're
right?
locked. They're locked.
Okay, they're locked.
And they're
That's-
traffic rated, so they'd be, you could drive a truck over them and do whatever. So the
Okay.
thought is these are simply, it would be like driving over any sort of concrete structure or whatever.
Okay,
And really, it's for picking things out. We'd drive a hoist up and we'd pull them from
oh,
above.
so
So
it's not like ladders with people
there is
climbing in?
one, but it really, this would not be a continued occupied space. So most of the work would happen in the building above there. So it'd be just for periodic inspections, just, quick checks.
Thank you.
Counselor Tabor?
I like the aesthetics of this.
Again,
and
for
it's nice
visual
to
purposes.
gain the sidewalk along the point of graves, but I would be concerned if we're narrowing that road. We've got pickup trucks with 28-foot boats
Yeah.
going across that all the time.
Put turning templates on that too to get like vehicle traffic around those. I think because it's configured, I think we did some turning radius stuff with some trucks and all that. I guess if there's something specific, if you want us to overlay
Well, I
that with
just-
like a fire truck or
It
something.
might be
we
a
can
good idea to put some cones out on the new route and
see how it works.
drag a trailer and have a car coming the other way or a truck coming the other way.
Those were taken into consideration.
Yeah.
There's also large vehicles going down onto Mechanic Street as well, because there's delivery trucks. So we looked at the turning radius, and the road actually shifts a little bit to gain that bump out with the green spaces and the new sidewalk. So it is, we are cognizant of the need to make sure we accommodate vehicles, so it's definitely something that's front and center.
Plus
I
the
think we
boat ramp's
overlaid, I
pretty
thought,
busy.
Underwood, they overlaid like our largest fire truck, I think, is typically we use for a vehicle. But I'll double check that just to make sure. But again, though, this is a first cut, so we'd have to go through PTS, all the other things. We'd do a full traffic analysis and all the engineering behind it, so.
Counselor Bullock?
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate all the work that's been done on this. This is certainly a very big project. We've seen it coming for a while now, and it's in a very sensitive area of town. But I am glad to hear that the aesthetics look very good to me. I don't know. I know the rendering always looks a little bit better than maybe, a finished product. But yeah, I want to make sure we're considering the boat launches over on Pierce Island, so boats will be coming from both areas, cars with trailers. I like that the sidewalks are actually they seem becoming safer. The sight lines and everything, I think, are making it a little safer there for pedestrians coming through Prescott Park and stuff. To me, I can't think of another aspect that hasn't been thought of at this point.
Yeah, that was the big one, trying to make sure things were below grade, and having some of those terrace walls allows us to change the topography a little bit. So, because when you come off of Mechanic Street and try to make that curve, it's a pretty steep curve there, so as long as it gives us a little bit of opportunity to kind of improve that, so.
Counselor Cook?
Sorry to follow on with another question. This is also the site of 7 critical parking spots in the neighborhood. With the reconfiguration of the road, would we be losing those or would we retain them? There are 4 that are about right in
Right at
this
the intersection
location,
down.
and then there are another 3 that are in front of the current pumping station.
Yeah, you want to go back to the site plan? Sure. We will lose some likely, just because parking that close to the intersection was challenging. We had one, I know there's a couple up higher, kind of before you get to the white building from the intersection. Those would be very challenging to keep. I think what we did is we had one there, but I think there's opportunities as you get further down toward the existing pump station itself. That picture goes further down, that we could look at parking spots as well. Because this was just, we weren't looking at like adding or keeping parking in there type thing. We were just kind of looking at more of the site itself. But I think that's something we could look at. If that's a community need that they really want to maintain all those, we can definitely look to optimize the best we can.
I would note that given the recent loss of 17 parking spots in the neighborhood, parking is extremely tight, and those spaces will be coveted.
I'll add that a future iteration will depict a reasonable number of parking spaces we think we can fit. I think we need to also stay away from this crosswalk or the
Yes.
view from it.
and something to be aware of in terms of like structure and parking and stuff. So do you see where that looks like a parking spot? That's actually the foundation wall of like the building itself too. So we're opening that up quite a bit. So I think that's something we can look at, is making sure we maximize the opportunities for parking in that area too. And it's that balance too. It's like, we know, and then we have to also maintain access too, because this will be drivable. So if we do have to get equipment in, a lot of the paths are wide and stuff, so we could drive on them. So I think we'll emphasize looking at that and making sure we can maximize what we can over there.
Thank you.
Counselor Flynn?
Yeah, I guess to that point, so is the road potentially narrowing at all, or is it retaining the same width?
It's gonna change, I think, because
Right.
it pinches down, it's wide, it's a little bit of everything. So I think what we try to do is try to maintain a consistent road profile. What did we do, 20s, what was it here on?
Closer to 26, but,
Yeah.
so it's pretty close to the original road width.
Pinch point.
But the road is moving around in the sense the whole thing's moving to one side, and then we by teeing up that intersection, you lose overall pavement space in the intersection. So I think, as Eric mentioned, it's a change, but we can get the exact dimensions as we present more on it.
Yeah, and also too, where you see a lot of like plantings and stuff in the retaining wall. Right now, you can park off the road on that gravel area kind of adjacent to it. That kind of disappears too, because we're trying to protect the corner, and we have infrastructure there as well. So I think we'll just have to make sure we specifically emphasize like what we can fit in there safely.
Counselor Tabor?
The slide about options says Prescott Park parcel of land requires land acquisition. Could we just
Right, I
unpack
think
that?
Suzanne could probably talk on that one.
So, as you may be aware, when we own property that has restrictions on it, which of course that parcel, as you identified it, does have restrictions, there's a process for doing that, and that is the eminent domain process, which we do in in consultation with the Attorney General's office, the charitable division, along with, given the nature of this, probably the probate court as well in terms of what to do. So we've had some initial conversations with the Attorney General's office, the charitable division, talking about process. For those of you who remember, we had to do this process when we built the renovation and the new addition to the middle school. So we had restricted land that was needed, and so we did eminent domain. We had a guardian ad litem who sits and is kind of like taking the city's role as protector, and that's the role that that person sits in, and evaluates the appraisal, makes, reports to you, in terms of sharing their opinion on the process and whether it's followed, and provides that input. And then we go through and figure out, okay, what is the value of our need to use that property, assuming there's a public necessity for it. So that's kind of the process that will happen. So very similar to what we did with the middle school, Connie Bean Center, we had the same thing. There was a process for doing that. So we're at the beginning of that process. The thought was, let's introduce kind of the work that's been done to date first, in terms of looking at all the alternatives, and then kind of get some initial feedback, and then we'll come back to you probably with a request to set up a public necessity hearing. Sort of that first step of the eminent domain, and we'll also be going out to get an appraisal. So that's kind of the process.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you all for the presentation. I know that there are some folks in the public and a lot of interest in this, so we'll open it up to any public comment now, questions. And again, this is the beginning of the process. We will follow a pretty lengthy public process on this, but any initial thoughts or feedback would be very helpful at this time. Yes, it is, Francesca.
Hi, Francesca Marconi, Fernald, 177 Mechanic Street. I understand the need for this project, absolutely. Obviously, my biggest concern is my business and access to it to get my deliveries. A lot of my deliveries will approach up the bridge and back all the way down Mechanic Street. Tractor Trailer Truck, Pepsi, PFG, Dennis Foods, Maine Shellfish and stuff like that. So I'm very concerned about, one, getting my deliveries because my window of opportunity for my income is very small. What you do in the winter doesn't affect me. My other one was, I know they're renderings, but I'm concerned about the sight line of the one, it's on 7, proposed concept rendering of this. When you pull up out of Mechanic Street to the stop sign for the Pierce Island Road, it's hard to see now. So there's gonna be a building to your right, and with everybody that speeds over the bridge, might wanna take that into consideration. I don't know, you said something about maybe the bridge moving?
Long-term, yeah. That-
Okay.
I mean, that's, the bridge is in.
Mike.
uh,
Eric, you have to speak into the
Microphones.
mic or nobody
Yeah,
else can hear.
long-term type, yes, but you're right, though, that around the corner with the building there. So the thought is we are raising the grade and trying to make it so it doesn't ramp up.
So it's
in
not
there.
as high a pitch?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
So, and that's also why we're changing the geometry a bit, too, to try to make the sight lines better, and also have people crossing not on that side as well, because that's also a challenge, because you have to pull up, and there's people crossing the road, and then they're coming over the
You
bridge,
gotta,
so.
yeah, you gotta put your head on a swivel.
But I think we have to probably dig into that and that analysis as well, just, I mean,
Yeah,
this is a concept, and, they put some good effort into trying to make sure the geometry was safer, but
yeah,
we
and,
could
and
do
I
more on that.
understand, it's just, so that's, a bunch of ideas flying right now. And my only other question is, I mean, obviously, I'm always concerned about my business and stuff like that, but I'm also concerned about a sidewalk on the cemetery side. Where is that property gonna come from?
That's in like the city right away, so we're actually shifting the road over. So that
So-
is basically currently paved type thing, because right now the pavement goes right up to the wall, where the
Yeah.
Jersey barriers.
Yeah,
So we're shifting it over, basically, that whole road shifts over a bit.
okay,
That's where
so
the
like
sidewalk is still in city.
if I'm at the
right away.
stop sign, it's gonna go this way a little
Mhm.
bit?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that makes sense then,
And
because
then with the terracing and stuff, trying to change the topography a bit to make that flattened out. the road.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's, yeah. Again, my biggest concern is my business.
Mhm.
I'm gonna say something naughty. I don't wanna have to invoke the Evelyn Marconi in me, okay? I'm a pretty easygoing person and, pretty easy to work with, but, sometimes you don't wanna poke the bear too much. I really, really love what I do, and I'm very conscious of what kind of a small neighborhood that I'm in, and I've got great neighbors, and I wouldn't do anything to disrupt them, and so I would expect the same of all of you, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Any
Thank you,
questions for
Francesca.
me?
Not yet, I'm sure we will have
All right.
a couple.
Peter Huda, Portsmouth. Since this is the first time I'm seeing your site plan, I do have some questions in just looking at it. First page in your concept, the concern is going below grade. So on page 6, you've got connection to Prescott Park and new pump station below grade. Is that a conflict? The next question is on, also on page 6, and on most of your pages, you show a new Mechanic Street line coming in. So is that cost included in the 10 million or 20 million that you're looking at? I'm looking at page 6, and in the back, it's also coming in. Is that coming down Mechanic Street, and how does that work? Next question is, I guess, on the site, since there's, what is the cost for rerouting the current flow through there included, or is this going to be done in stages? Did you do any of that yet? And next, I'm going to go to some of your bonding that's already been done. So according to the CIP, this is listed in FY '28, as 10 million. And you're going to look at getting 10 million plus from either the feds or the state. Can you please elaborate on that? Next thing is, if I go to your bonding schedule, this is on page 50. We have already put quite a bit of money out to bond for pump station improvements and actually the Mechanic Street Station. So my question is, where are we on that money? Do we have any left over that can help you out here and pay for this 10 million? I'll just look at some of them that I found. 6/2019, bonding for annual sewer lines and pump stations, 3 million. In 4/6/21, Mechanic Street Pump Station, 3,000,006 next year, and 6/23/22. Again, the force main, another 2 million. 6/20/24, FY22 pump station upgrades, 750,000. 23, same description, 800,000. 25, FY25 pump station upgrades, 700,000. And the new one coming in for next year is pump station improvements, 500,000. These also go through on your bonding expectations going forward. With in 29, you're asking for 750, and in 31, 750. So how is this flowing into what you've already put on here, and how's the money going to work, and where are you going to get it? That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, I could comment on a couple options. In terms of below grade versus above grade pump stations, essentially the gravity sewer comes in at the gravity sewer level. So the pump station right now, the bottom of it is below sea level, and the new one will as well. Oh, sorry. So the depth of it is the depth of it. It's just a matter of how far that wet well and building extends above the ground. So we can do it at grade and have like a green space on top, or we can extend the building all the way up. But the wet well has to go all the way down to make sure that the gravity sewer is a place to go. So it's whether it's, so the excavation is the excavation depth. And then some of those other ones those are just other pump station related. We have 22 pump stations, so there's other work that has to happen. So we're trying to keep this one separate from the other projects
So
throughout the city.
Eric, just to restate that, the pump station and the need to be out of the floodplain is because the pump itself has to be out of the floodplain, or no?
Depends on the type of pump. What I think we're proposing is pumps that are submersible. They can be below the water.
Okay.
The pumps that we have now, though, are below the water, but they're protected because there's a building and it's basically enclosed all the way up, unless it overtops that. So, but the reality is these pump stations, like you have to go, it's all going by gravity there. So these things are like negative, what's it, -3.7, something like that. So that's what the bottom of the pump station currently is below the water level. It's just protected so the water doesn't get in very well. So the thought with ours, what we're proposing is that the top of that structure, it just is a little bit below grade, and then we can plant and do stuff above it versus bringing the building all the way. So there's a benefit to that, but it's also below water level, so there's.
Okay, and then on cost, maybe a Peter question. We'll have an updated cost opinion by the end of January 2027. Is that?
Yeah, we'll likely be able to give you something even before then. I mean, a lot of the funding that Peter was referring to are monies that are associated with other pumping stations. As Eric said, there's 22 pump stations in the city. Each of them require upgrades. The force main monies she identified were for the new force main out to the island. There's sewer and pump station monies. We have over 100 miles of sewer lines, thousands of manhole structures. So there's a lot of money that's associated with maintaining the overall system, but the pumping station budget includes any of the sewer work around the pump station, the force main and the gravity lines. So those are all considered as part of the big project. So we can report back and have a more detailed report in terms of what the existing funding is for the pumping station.
Well, this is gonna come as a part of the capital improvement plan that we go
Yep.
through next year. So.
Yep, and we have a good indication that there's state monies, grant monies
Very
to be
interesting.
offsetting this.
Yeah, and we've also spent significant money at the station itself just to get it through the next 5 years, because we've had significant pump failures. There's significant degraded equipment. So just to get us through this design and construction phase, it'll take several years to do that. We just have to make sure they can operate through that time frame. So there's we still have to maintain and operate it. So that's the problem, is until there's a new facility, like, we have significant costs to incur just to keep it going, so.
Eric, thank you for clarifying that, because what Peter was saying was Mechanic Street, says right in your plan, so just want to point that out. So thank you for clarifying. She was talking about Mechanic Street too. I want to thank Francesca. I totally agree. It's a working waterfront, and we have to get big boats down there. We have a 38-foot boat coming in, and we have a 30-foot boat that comes down through there. So the only way they can do it is they do what Francesca does, they back down. I know my neighbor has boats that come in there. I think he has a 29-footer. And so I just encourage you to remember, this is a working waterfront. Welcome back, Terry. I'm sure you wish at this point we did move it off the island, but we didn't. So now we're dealing with this. I would ask that you really think about putting the pipes in the waterway. We've had numerous issues with them going up on the bridge and over that way. As we can remember, we've had leaks. We've had other things go on. And if you have a good wind shear, I'm sure you're gonna have a problem. So I would encourage you to really look at the whole concept of putting them down underneath. I heard the ledge, and I agree with the ledge, but I also know there's a lot of new technology out there that can deal with a lot of that, those issues. I would also encourage you to think about, do we really want a massive pump station to be our visual as we go across Pierce Island? I've worked hard for years to save Pierce Island. I was able to keep the sewage treatment plant within the area by some votes, and I would just really worry about the aesthetics of having a building this big right there as people are going over the island. I think you're going to miss a lot of the ambiance. My other question would be is, how come we have to build such a big one? I heard new technologies, but I also look at the plan you had up there. It was quite small, our current one, and I've been told now for 5 years, maybe 6, that we're having less and less sewage going across to Pierce Island. And so I know that the Pierce Island plant and the Newcastle Ave plant are the only things that are going over to the island. And when they get to the island, it's really all the sewage for the whole city, except for what's up at Pease and Greenland, because that goes to Pease. So it really is the sewage line. So I know we heard about the other 22 plants out there, but these are the 2 big ones. And I would ask, why do we have to build it so big with all the technology? And if you go online, you can see a lot of new technology out there. But I find this building, it looks like it's almost quadruple in size to what we currently have, is questionable. And it's going to take a lot of that property. And instead of the beautification that we see going over, it's going to be a big building. And no matter how you put lipstick on it, it's still going to be a big building. So I would encourage you to think about that. Really, let's be truthful, and let's use the most modern technology. I would think about using the bridge, and this is the first I'm hearing we're going to move the bridge. But if we're moving the bridge, then that should be the first and foremost thing before we do any of this. Get that plan so that you can figure out how you're going to get the pipes across to the other side. But those would be my statements to start off with this whole project. And I would also really question targeting the Prescott sisters' land. You know, we have, down in the south end, we've fought for years to keep that, the Prescott Park. And I don't want to see any inroads and intrusion on that concept. And lastly, there's a cemetery right there. There has been conversation about whether the graves are just only there So I guess my question would be, has anyone considered that cemetery and what that might mean and how far people might be buried out into the road? And I would like to honor that cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any comments, Eric, on the size and the
Sure.
flow?
So directional drilling, so trying to get the force main, again, it's trying to get the wastewater to the other side. Directional drilling is kind of infeasible on this one because you have ledge that slopes and then you have the sediment type thing. Trying to go between those is very challenging, so it has to go down 80 feet plus more because the directional drill has to go in like an arc type thing, and then trying to launch it and receive it is very challenging in this site because of around all the other things. And then that whole pier area and stuff, it's cribbing and there's all sorts of structural supports there that were put in to reinforce that, which make it even more challenging. So it's technically like almost infeasible to do that. And then in terms of why so big, I mean, that's as small as we could shrink it. That's what we have right now is a generator outside. So this building includes a generator and electrical gear. It's about as small as we can make it. The wet well is massive. And I guess if you go inside Mechanic Street when it's really raining and it's actually running, the whole pumps are shaking and stuff. So wet wells are bigger now because you don't get cavitation and weird hydraulics. So what happens is there's so much cavitation that these pumps start shaking and rocking. And it's funny when we try to get like a rebuild on these, they kind of laugh when we say, "Hey, what's the warranty on this?" I mean, you can't warranty them because the pumps are operating so far like outside what would be like a normal acceptable environment. Just because when you shoehorn big pumps in there, they create this. You can hear like it sounds like a straw sucking. It's like, and they vibrate and stuff. So you see these. So it's a very challenging environment for these pumps to operate. And this is very small for a facility of this size. So, and archaeological type of thing. That's definitely something that we're going to have people on site whenever there's earth disturbing activities. Because we agree that this is challenging and we don't know exactly where everything is. So it's going to be a priority, especially working close to any historically and culturally significant areas. So.
Yeah. Hi, Paige Trace, Portsmouth. I'll take up where Esther left off, and she's right. There is a question with the cemetery. And needless to say, that'll involve ground penetrating radar. That would be the safest and best way to find out whether they're bodies before you go digging. Next, the pumping station was built in 1963. So the question is, where does that fit within the scheme of things such as SHPO and Suzanne, Attorney Woodland's heard all of this before when we rebuilt the intersection going on to Pierce Island. So all the same things that applied to that intersection and the wastewater treatment facility applied to this project. The other question I have is, what is the final figure on this? What is the amount of money when you're all said and done? Not when you're applying for a matching grant, not when you're going to DES to get more funds. What is the final figure, the gross figure on the plan? And that includes my other situation is that I have an issue with is you've got right in the drawings here tonight that there is a new sewer main coming down Mechanic, but you don't say where it starts to get to the new facilities. Is it going all the way down Mechanic Street? Where is it starting? And is all of Mechanic Street going to end up getting ripped up? Because that's the lesser of all evils.
So it's the red line that was shown on the drawings, sorry, basically connects the existing pump station.
Just face this way.
Sorry.
Yeah, you don't have to talk to the people.
All right, so that red line on there connects the existing pump station itself to like the proposed location of the pump station. So that's what that red line is. That's simply a normal sewer line extension on the parcel itself. The force main side of things, so right now, the existing pump station, you have two mains that go out, that goes to a common one, and then it goes up to the bridge and then it splits.
Right.
So what we're proposing is putting a parallel line with it so that we have full redundancy, because right now we have a single point of failure.
So you're going to essentially have 3 lines so that you can use the 2 and then put the third in So that you always, yeah,
Well, so it's
it's
one- yeah.
redundancy.
One gravity going into the new facility and then basically paralleling the existing force main onto the bridge type thing. So you have two pump pressurized ones and one gravity feeding the facility.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just more of like redundancy, right? Because you want to, if you have one problem with the main, you have a full redundancy type
Yeah.
thing. Because wherever there was that force main issue a few years ago.
Can't help himself.
Sorry, I can't. It's just, we want to make sure we have that firm capacity and that full redundancy. So you don't have to bypass and do kind of these temporary facilities. You just kind of run off of the, you know, the infrastructure that's been baked into it.
the other question as an issue of housekeeping is the odor control has been less than adequate over the last couple of years from Pierce Island. And are we going to have the same issues with odor control, only a lot more in the neighborhood's face with this?
Yeah, so odor control is a challenge, right? So the issues at Pierce Island is, I think the anticipation is that the carbon or the odor media would last for 5 to 7 years, and we're seeing that it was consumed in like 2 years. So we have that in the capital plan now, where we have our operating supplies, materials have gone up dramatically. So we replace those on a 2-year cycle. So we do, you know, Peas at 1 year, and then we do Pierce Island the next year, or we split each facility as is. So that's, now that we know the kind of like odorous loads that we're having, that we're kind of baking that into it. But yeah, odor control is a thing. So
Thank
it's
you.
like, it's, because it's front and center. This is, we already have odor control at the site. The goal is to have less odor, but again.
Yes, please.
But again, though, just hiding it and making sure it's not visually obtrusive is going to be the challenge, I think. So.
Yeah, with all due respect, let me say I'm the first person to understand what you're trying to do and that it's noble and that it has to get done. You've come to the end of the road with this pumping station. So there has to be a solution that has to be found. The only other thing I would say at the end of the day to the mayor, to the city manager, and to you as city councilors is that the Prescott sisters gave Prescott Park, not to the Park Festival, but to the people of Portsmouth. And so it's the people of Portsmouth who own, in their hearts and their minds, and technically, with the Attorney General, own the park. So I say to you, if you're going to take that parcel of land for the treatment station, then maybe you should, for the pumping station, maybe you should find another parcel of land to give back to the people of Portsmouth as a small park that's city-owned. And the other thing that you have to think of is, where are you moving the bridge to eventually? Because when you go to the Attorney General for that property, maybe you need to think, or you've already thought about the land on the other side that you're going to have to ask the Attorney General for to redo the bridge. So all in all, the residents of Portsmouth deserve a new park somewhere out of city property. And I know that's not something you want to hear, but it would go a long way towards making people a lot happier. Anyway, I thank you for your time, and I am thrilled to see that Underwood is taking over this project, and good to see old faces here. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Paige.
I'm Joanna Brode, and I live at 122 Mechanic Street, not directly across from the existing pumping station, but a little bit cat-a-corner to it. So I'm on the corner of Mechanic and Gardner Street, okay? Thank you for considering this. We have lived with that pumping station for the past 20 years. We've dealt with effluent and mold and odor and all kinds of horrible situations with it, including noise, and we're hoping that this will be a remedy for what has in the past been a real problem. It is also very ugly. The city tried to make it pretty for a while and put some trees in front, which a couple of them died, and they never got replaced, but that's beside the point. My issues are many, but I want to make sure that we've considered the odor issues and the effluent. What I can't figure out from your plans, what's happening to the existing station? where does that go? Does that come down? Does that get repurposed? What?
Eric, you can answer it, but you got to promise to
All right,
speak
sorry.
into the microphone. Joanna, he's not going to face you, just so the
I
folks at
know,
home
I know.
can.
Okay, so maybe I should finish and then you
Sure,
can
that's
answer?
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We live on the corner, as I said, of these two streets, and we have a rock wall in front of our house. It has been hit repeatedly by trucks and, boats being pulled down, and people don't see it, and it gets knocked down, and we have to replace it. You've got the same problem where you're putting this existing station. And I think I speak from many people that needs to be a consideration when you plan this new structure, if it's to happen. The other thing is people go over that bridge way too fast. And that's a consideration. You might want to consider speed bumps or something, but it really is really a nightmare sometimes. Okay, my issue again is construction. How is it going to affect the historic houses that line that street? When some property was being done, or some construction was being done a number of years ago at the pumping station, it affected our interior, and it caused some big cracks in our dining room. And so the question is, how are we going to, there's going to be all kinds of construction going on, and how will that affect the houses, the historic houses that line that street? And I can't answer that, but and like Paige, I wanted to know about the new sewer main. I think you've explained it. It's very confusing. I'll ask Paige to explain it to me later. And the secondary structure, there's no rendering. What is that supposed to look like? I didn't get, you've got the big structure on the corner, and then I presume a replacement of some sort that will either be partially underground, or if there's something on top, what is that going to look like?
Yeah, so, yeah, there's nothing.
Joanne, is that?
I think that's all
okay.
of my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go through a couple of these. So, we didn't render the below-grade structure, because when you're looking at it, it's really just the ground, and then you have some hatches on it type thing. So essentially, it's a concrete box below grade, and then those hatches are kind of little chimneys that are, so you have some soil above it. But really, all you're gonna see is whatever is chosen to be like the surface restoration and a couple of hatches sporadically
Okay.
around there. So there's not a lot to see, other than like what we can imagine sort of landscaping-wise and
Okay.
restoration-wise.
That's reassuring, yeah.
And then the building itself, with this concept, that building goes away. It's entirely gone. So it would basically, that would be plantings, it could be any number of other things, and how
Okay.
that surface is restored. So
Okay.
and that's the benefit of not trying to repurpose that building, is that it essentially doesn't exist, and it opens up this real estate for
Yeah,
whether that's other uses, art opportunity, any number of other public benefits or amenities.
okay.
Yeah, the goal, odors, definitely, that's gonna be one of our critical things. I think it's not again, I think we understand sort of the odor loads now. So sizing that, maintainability, and replacing the carbon on a frequent interval, I think that's a priority for us. And then, yeah, armoring kind of turning movements, so like corners and things like that, so that'll be a priority. And we have retaining walls, but there'll probably be some structured large boulders or other things where we try to protect, people from like getting off or being adventurous into the bushes and the greenery and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
and then speed control, I think that, I don't know if we've looked at raised crossings and stuff, so some of these we have to coordinate with emergency services and other things like that and what's acceptable. I think moving the crossing away from the bridge gives more time for people to react, even if they are going fast. So the thought is, but I think that's a discussion to have, because I know, speed bumps are,
Horrible, but,
yeah, so we're balancing like kind of the public safety side of things, where the
Exactly.
public safety on like, speed and other things. So
yeah.
I think that's a whole conversation that we have to have, and it's one that there's, every different parties have different opinions and needs. So I can't guarantee anything on that one, but I think that's a discussion we will have.
Okay,
So
all right. And in terms of the construction, I mean,
it's a big
you're going to
project.
have big jackhammers and trucks and all kinds of,
Right, it's hard to say exactly how it is, but with the city
Mayor,
project,
What I think we'll do is articulate further about the construction and the sequencing
Yeah.
at future public meetings. We
Okay.
will have more information to share.
all right.
because if it's restricting means and methods or other things like that, then those are things we'd have to have discussions with, because there's a cost kind of benefit analysis. And you know, private construction sometimes doesn't have the same level of requirements that like the city will follow
Okay.
during construction.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna.
Hi, Kyle LaChance, South School Street, also new president of Friends of the South End.
Congrats.
Thanks. Well, first, I'd like to say that I will be very happy to see what I not so affectionately call the rat house come down. So I'm looking forward to that White House being brought down. So question about the green space, is that actually going to be accessible, or is it going to be fenced off to protect the pump house and the other, any other,
The goal is it's a public amenity, it's accessible, right?
okay,
I
so
think-
that in fact would then replace what is being taken away in the Prescott Park area?
Correct. So the goal is to basically be able to provide some public amenities or benefits on top of just having a pump station, whereas right now you can access the water, but there are fencing areas and stuff. The goal is to try to have the above grade stuff contained and screened as best we can, and then the rest of it would be kind of a multi-use space. So it could be used for public benefit, and then the city from time to time would have to access some of those things or whatnot. So, the intent is not to fence it in, because it's a waterfront. It's, you know, not everyone lives on the water, so having some ability to access the waterfront is one of our goals of the project, so.
Okay, then the next thing is the sidewalk concern. So currently, there's no sidewalk on either side, and now it looks like there's gonna be a sidewalk on the right, then a crosswalk, and then another sidewalk. At the same time, the cemetery committee is gonna be rebuilding the rock wall at the Point of Graves. And so my concern is, what is the height of that rock wall? Because I'm not sure if that, and Peter, maybe you can correct me, but I'm not sure if that's been determined, what the height is. But being only 5'1", when I come around the corner, it's very hard for cars to see around that rock wall. And I don't see that crosswalk has actually been repositioned at all. Just looks like there's a sidewalk, and then there's going to be a little bit of space, and then the crosswalk. So I'm concerned that there's still not great visibility when you're coming up Mechanic Street from Marcy. And then I'm wondering if it's possible to actually put in a crosswalk sign that you could push a button and you have the flashing lights, as we have on a couple places there's one on South Street, if that's something that would be considered.
I think we'll take all of, in terms of, you know, it sounds like we're balancing a lot of safety as well as access. You know, that's the first thing I thought of when I thought of like a raised hump or something like that, that it's going to be a lot harder to get a boat trailer around something like that. So being able to balance those things is probably going to be a separate working session that we have where we hear, you know, back from this, or at PTS where this is discussed, you know, at length with a lot of public input. But those are kind of things that are not necessarily in conflict, but the harder you make it, the safer you make it, but it also, you know, could prevent some vehicles that can currently access that place accessing it, and we don't want to do that as well. But I think that there is, as identified here, a lot of things that we're going to look at from a safety standpoint, and in trying to take a situation that's not ideal at the moment because of traffic speeds and sight lines and improve it without, you know, necessarily saying that it's going to be the best it can, because we're still going to have to put a pump station somewhere in that vicinity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle, and congrats. Any other speakers? We're a little late for the meeting, but happy to go over on this. All right, well, I want to thank everybody that came out, and I think there's a lot of follow-ups. We'll try to get those question and answers onto potentially the project page, because I think that, you know, since we do the project page, it's a great place for people to, if they don't have Paige's cell phone number, to be able to call and get those answers. You know, one thing that we didn't touch on, Suzanne, tonight was whether this would have to go through, you know, the 106 process, if this is a historically significant site. You know, I'm trying to remember, you know, when they built the Unitil, if that's a part of the facility that's on Prescott Parkland, or if that's separate from that. So still more to discuss at a later time, you know, what that actually means for all of this. But look forward to the conversations, and appreciate everybody that came out in this really, you know, big, important project that's, you know, it's with a lot of folks that are with a lot of eyes. So look forward to doing a great job on this and appreciate, you know, it off to a pretty decent start here to be able to have this conversation with everybody here. So thank you, and we will start the meeting.